yeah, really look forward to hearing in particular from Pete and Jed shortly. Pete is someone that I met maybe 2 years ago when I did some training at Cliff College on bereavement, and he came along and shared his experience working with young people over I think over 25 years. So a lot of experience in this area, and really pleased that he's able to join us. And also Jed, as I'm allowed to call her, Jedine Pendley-Daley, who is actually a leader of our first church plant, The Ends, working with young people, not just across Birmingham in this online age, but also young people across the country who are connecting in. And Jedine co-pastors The Ends with her husband, Richard. So really pleased that they are both able to join us and to lead us in this first session, supporting young people. So I'm going to hand over to them now, and thanks Pete and Jed for your time this morning.
Thank you so much, Cassius. I hope everyone can hear us. And it's so good to be here, and it's great to work with Jed as well. And we're going to do a bit of a double act here. Hope all the technology works okay. And thank you, Omar, for doing our next slide, please, bit. So yeah, we're gonna do about 45 minutes, and then give you plenty of time to ask us questions. And yeah, so we're just gonna chip in and go through this presentation that we put together. So I say the famous words, next slide, please. We've got one here, supporting young biblical perspective. So when I started working with young people many years ago, I wrote a course. At the time it was called Losing Someone Close, and I wanted to go into school and use this course. And the two verses that really were at the front of my mind, the first one was from 1 Chronicles, and David's recruiting warriors to join an army, and he's got a long list of the numbers and the descriptions of the warriors that are going to join this army. And then in verse 32 he talks about recruiting people who knew the times and knew what Israel should do. And that was just one of the things, especially in the time we're in now. How important is it for us to know the times and what we should do? And then the second verse that was really important to me was just about asking the Holy Spirit to give us the words that sustain the weary. And boy, have we got some weary people at the moment, haven't we? And yeah, Jed's going to probably talk about some of the young people she's working with. And we're going to hear a story of one of those young people who's kindly written up about their experience. We're going to hear about that later. Next slide, please, Omar. So yeah, knowing the times. I mean, we're living in a time of loss. It's a time of loss, isn't it? We've all lost community, we've lost routine. Some of us have lost employment. With that goes money. Freedom, security, and identity. It's a huge time of loss. Jed, do you want to just say anything about that? You're on mute, Jed.
I've got 2 teenage girls, and I didn't really feel that they're experiencing loss, as to say. I normally associate loss with losing a loved one, but loss in terms of not being able to go to school, which is their normal routine, not being able to walk to school with their friends, which is when they socialize and meet. It's been, I would say, horrendous for them, because what they're used to, they're no longer able to to obtain. And I would say things as well for those that are in year 11, they would normally be working towards their GCSEs, and even though they are working online, it's a lot different to them actually being in school. So with the government saying that they may not have their exams, that's a sense of loss as well. And I think as parents and as people that work with young people, we need to recognize these things as loss and recognize that this affects young people more, I would say more greatly than we would like to think.
I think that's really helpful, Jed. And when we were preparing this, we were both talking, you know, I think it's important that we, as we think about loss and our young people in our churches, we keep this in mind, that there are so many things. And Jed just said, you know, walking to school with her friends, you know, her daughter walking to school with her friends. We probably wouldn't even think about that, but you know, that's where they catch up, isn't it? You know, what's the latest gossip? You know, who's going out with who, or who likes who, and all of those things. And they're missing out on all of that. So let's move on with our slides. Omar, next slide, please. And you know, family challenges. My children are all grown up. How I would manage, you know, at home at the moment if my children were young, yeah, there's fear and anxiety. Families are spending too much time together, and this is without, you know, throwing into the pot a bereavement. And there's families who don't spend time together, who are thrown together and can't sort of escape from each other. And then, of course, the additional perspective. And then, as Jed says, I was talking to a year 11, let's put the next slide on, a year 11 perspective on this. And she said to me, it's like we started writing this book. I don't know if you can see this slide, I'll just read it. It's like we started writing this book in year 7, and we kind of knew what the ending was going to be, but now the pages have been ripped out. And I thought, whoa, that's a powerful thing, isn't it? Started writing this book. I knew it was going to happen. You know, I was going to sit my GCSEs and we'd have the prom. And then it's like, whoa, what happened to that? Next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, all sorts of stuff. Last minute revision. You know, I missed out on doing my exams. Work marked down, last days, goodbye speeches, dressing up, running out of school, just being crazy, getting your yearbook signed and shirts signed, and saying goodbye to the teachers that you love and the teachers that you don't like so much. Next slide. And grief, I heard this the other day, really good. Grief is as unique as a fingerprint. This just reminds me of, I've been making a little model for my grandchildren, and my phone has fingerprint touch thing, and I got glue all over my fingers, and it covered my fingerprint, and I couldn't get into my phone with my fingerprint, because my fingerprint is unique. It's a unique thing, and grief is as unique as a fingerprint. Next slide. So, yeah, over to Jed. This amazing story from Remy.
Okay, so Remy is a young person that I know, and she comes to our sessions at the end. And Remy lost her grandmother, and I'm just going to share her story. I believe that counselling can be very useful to a person trying to navigate through difficult life situations, whether that be due to a loss of a loved one or even stress. Counselling gives you the opportunity to deal with your emotional issues and provides a space where someone can just listen to you and help guide you through these challenging situations. When finding out about the loss of my grandmother last October, I was full of lots of different emotions: anger, frustration, sadness, and even peace. I was angry and frustrated because I didn't get to say goodbye to her. This was due to the pandemic. The last time I saw my nan was sometime in February, before all visits to care homes were off limits. We had several updates about how my nan was doing, and they were all positive until September the 27th. We were told that my nan was starting to deteriorate and that she wouldn't have long left, but that they were going to keep her settled in the care home. The care home also gave my family the opportunity to say goodbye to my nan, but I couldn't because I'm under 18. I decided to record a prayer to let my nan know how much she meant to me, and this was played to her by my mum and auntie. Sadness was expected because I had lost an important figure in my life who I had lived with and have so many fond memories with. And then peace, knowing that she didn't have to endure any pain or suffering anymore, really helped me with my mourning, as well as the support from loved ones and school. I was offered counselling sessions in school after they had found out about the loss of my grandmother. It was highly recommended as a way for me to manage my different emotions and feelings. My family also thought it was a good idea for me to have these counselling sessions, as they knew that I was struggling with the loss of my nan. I had 8 sessions, all focused on managing emotions and finding different ways to do that, whether that's by talking to someone you trust or giving yourself some space to think, to be able to identify what you were really feeling. I'm quite good with managing my emotions, but with the stress from still trying to keep my grades up while mourning my nan, it was a lot. And I don't think that I would have managed in school if I hadn't had those 30 minutes every week to just breathe. So I do think that it's important that young people have counselling or just some space to be able to talk through their emotions with someone when dealing with loss. It gives you that time to be able to forget about what is going on for a second and helps you to feel like you're yourself again. And that's Remy's story. What I just wanted to add to Remy's story is how important it is that we support young people. And as Pete's already said, that the grief of, loss, not having exams and what have you. But in supporting young people, I would just encourage you all to just follow your local safeguarding policies. It's important that anything we do with young people, that our policies and procedures are adhered to. Thank you for listening to Remy's story.
Oh, thank you. I hope you'll pass on our thanks to Remy. It's so powerful hearing from young people themselves. And I was so struck, she couldn't go to the care home, but she had support from loved ones and she had support from school, which is really good. And just 30 minutes a week she said, to just breathe, to have a space. I was on a webinar yesterday with the Cinnamon Network, and it struck me. Somebody said, as youth workers and as churches, time is the thing clinical professionals don't have. Time is the thing clinical professionals don't have. We have time, and as Jed says, safeguarding is so important, and you'll have your policies as to how you can give time to young people, whether that's a phone call through parents' mobile or write a letter, even an old-fashioned letter, pop it in the post. How many young people get letters, but we've got time. We can make time. That's important. So the next slide is called What Did We Know About Young People and How It Affects Children, about bereavement. What did we know about bereavement and how it affects children and young people? Well, we knew in the olden days, we knew roughly 1 in every 30 of 15-year-olds would experience the death of a parent, but we're still working this out. We don't know what the statistics are going to be, really. But we can go back and, moving on the slides, we can learn from 9/11. 9/11 was an awful time, wasn't it? So long ago now. But next slide, Omar. Learning from 9/11, 41% of children saw a parent crying. 47% were worried about their own safety, and 17% knew someone who's been bereaved. And I'm thinking, you know, how many children see a parent crying? Often we'll sort of hide away, won't we, if we're upset, so that our children don't see us crying. How many more children have seen a parent crying? How many more children are worried about their own safety, especially now, you know, just going outside, or earlier on in the pandemic, very much like, oh, I'm not going to go out because I'm scared of catching the virus. Next slide, please. So how might a teen feel when they lose someone close? I think when I'm working with young people, excuse my very high-tech whiteboard, a good way of thinking and helping young people, we just think about this is the awful event this is the event that happened. It's a muddle, it's a mess, it's confusing, and it's like a whirlpool or a spiral of different feelings. So what sort of feelings? Omar, I think these come up one by one. Just pop them all up. Guilty, maybe, angry, resentful, depressed, worried, maybe going back to being overly dependent, divided loyalties. You know, I'm not sure. I didn't really know grandma. You know, everyone's so upset, but grandma lived in another country, or grandma lived a long way away. I never saw grandma. So I feel guilty because I don't feel like everyone else. So there's all this going round and round. And even if you can just get a piece of paper, you know, get on the phone to the young person you're talking away, why don't you just go get a bit of paper, just go through this, scribble a messy mess in the middle. That's just everything that's happened. And a spiral around the outside. Just put on some of those words of feelings that you're experiencing. That's helpful. The other thing you can do is describe it. The next slide shows something called the river of life. The river of life. So this is, you know, we're going along the river of life in our boat, everything's fine, and then suddenly we're plummeted down this waterfall. It feels like a waterfall, and we're into this whirlpool, and everything is just so confusing. And maybe the boat that we originally had that got us through life, that boat is being smashed to pieces on the rocks. And we have to think about, do I need to change my boat? You know, do I need to make it stronger? Do I need to rely on God more? Do I need to, you know, rely on my family and my friends? Maybe I haven't been looking to them. Anything to say on that, and on that illustration, Jed, as you know, from your perspective?
I would say there's different experiences for different communities. And when I was having a conversation with Pete, I was saying, because I'm from a Caribbean background, and in terms of loss, what normally happens is it's what some communities will call 9 nights, where people would visit that family every night until the funeral, and they would bring food round, they would show love and support, and that would be the norm. But now, because of COVID on top of loss, what we would normally do, we can't do that anymore. We would normally put our arms around each other and, you know, hug the hurt away, so to speak, even though we know that the hurt's not going to go away just from a hug. But these are the normal things that we would normally do. So that person who's experiencing the shock and the numbness of denial and they're mourning, they may feel like they're doing it alone, because we can text them, we can video call them, but nothing's like that face-to-face contact, that physical hug, that those words of wisdom on a face-to-face level. So not only have we got the river of life that is going on, we've also got things that we would class as normal taken away from us because of the current pandemic we're in at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've got a slide later on talking about some of those things that we can't do. And I guess in all of this, it must, you know, you maybe watching this and thinking, oh, this is exhausting. But actually, do you know, most young people are gonna be okay because they've got a supportive family, they've got a church community. They will muddle through, and whatever. Language with grief is a difficult, you know, they'll be okay. What does okay mean? But yeah, they'll come through it with support, and they'll be okay. I've got to say it. So what areas of change cause potential stress? Because young people, children and young people are growing at the same time as they're having this bereavement. They've got some other stuff. So on the next slide, what they're dealing with anyway, and which some of these involve loss anyway. So physically they're developing. So if you've got like a 10-year-old boy, he's maybe a bit clumsy because his head hasn't worked out that his arms and legs have grown a lot overnight. You go to that chart on the wall. I never got high on that chart. I'm only 5'4", so I was pretty low. My son is up here. I couldn't even reach the top of the chart. So physically, academically, you know, stuff's changing, especially going from primary to secondary school. Socially, whole seminar, isn't it? What's happening for them socially? Emotionally, I work as a school counsellor, so most of my weeks, even if I've got a bereaved child, it could be the thing that is the big thing for them that week is they've fallen out with their friendship group. So if you've got a 12-year-old daughter or anywhere around that age and they fall out with their friends, you know what that feels like. And yeah, emotionally and sexually they are developing, so there's so much change. So bear that in mind as you think about the effects of a bereavement. They're also dealing with all of this stuff and would be anyway. What helps? So what helps? Let's just look at a slide from Child Bereavement UK, the next slide. So Child Bereavement UK, great source of information. They say just being honest, just being clear at the level that a child or young person can understand, reassuring them that they're not to blame. That sounds a bit of a strange one, but you know, if you've got a child had an argument with dad or someone before they went out to work, and then there's a sudden death, you know, the child is going to think, well, was it me who caused, or might think, was it me who caused that? You know, did they have a heart attack because I caused it? Normal routines, especially in pandemic at the moment, normal routines are so important for a child and a young person. Having time to talk, being listened to, and grieving in their own way. Jedine, anything to add from, you know, your experience there?
I was just going to say, in terms of reassurance, not to blame, I have heard of young people who have been when they were able to go to school, they've gone to school, and they've had the coronavirus and passed it on to an elderly relative who has subsequently died because of that. And it's hard for that child to navigate that wasn't their fault. It's just the current situation that we're in, the current climate that we're in, and it's helping that child to navigate those feelings. And I think, as well, as you said, it's time to talk. I mean, at the moment, you've got parents working from home, children working from home, and it may feel for that young person that everything is done at home, so they haven't got that time, that cut-off time to talk at home. Because what some parents are doing, which I know they're doing, is they may start work later and then work later into the evening to make sure that they're around to homeschool their children. And then when the evening comes, it's meal times, but they may not get the opportunity to make that time to talk. But as you said, Pete, it's really essential and really important that we give young people their space, and when they're ready, we make that time to be able to have those conversations with them.
Yeah, we're learning, aren't we? None of us have got a template for dealing with a pandemic. It's not there in our heads. We know, we, as an adult, we're sort of used to know what bereavement and death look like, funerals. Well, it's all changed. Yeah, good point. So what do we say? What, or don't we say? Next slide has just got a list of some, from that, knowing the words to sustain the weary, and maybe the words that won't necessarily. And some of these we just say, don't we, without thinking. But if you're working with a young child, just imagine, if you're like 5 years old, she passed away. We lost your mother. Well, that was careless. Go and find her. I need my mum. Grandpa's gone to sleep. Well, no way am I going to sleep if, that's what happens. God has called Daddy home. He's gone to his eternal rest. And we want to sort of not upset the child or the young person, so we use different words, but I don't know. I think actually it doesn't always help. So we need to think, it's okay to say the words. One of the books, which seems really, I recommend, it seems really blunt. It's called What Does Dead Mean? Oh, and that's like very blunt, isn't it? By Jenny Thomas. And it deals with all those questions perhaps that children might ask, and you think, oh, I can't, I don't know how to answer that. It's not from a Christian perspective, but it's a very good, very useful book. How do we help a young person? The next slide, how do we help a young person? Well, there's various ways, and having regular contact with them. It's difficult to do that, but we've said, a phone call, a letter, maybe sending them some a little book to work through. I do a shameless plug for the book I've written called Tough Stuff, which has lots of pages here they can work through. What I sometimes do, I send one of these to a young person, and then we will go through that book together on the phone, or we'll do it, via a video call. You need to check out your safeguarding on doing video calls as a whole, routine to be able to do that. But just working through that book with a young person is very helpful. Don't assume that they're doing okay. Don't assume they're not doing okay. Do you know what? Sometimes they just need a break from the grief that is in the house, especially during the pandemic. As Jed says, they can't get away from the grief. Yeah. Anything to add there, Jed, on that one? Helping a young person, it's your area.
Absolutely. I mean, I was going to say, I'll use my son as an example. Recently, there's been a loss of a friend's child, and my son's in Manchester and he's studying at university. And I didn't expect him to feel this loss as much as he has, simply because he didn't spend much time with the young person, but he knew them. And when they did see each other, they had conversations. And it was only one morning my husband said to me, oh, Jed, Kai's just let me know that he's having a really difficult time. So, I presumed, as Pete has said, that he was doing okay, but he didn't have that conversation with me. He chose to have that conversation with his dad. So I was just glad that he had someone else to speak to. So it may not be yourselves as parents or yourselves as grandparents. It may well be someone outside of the family. And I'll use the example in Remy's case. I would text Remy every other day just to check in on her, just to see how her counselling sessions were going and if she needed any added support. And sometimes we can be that extra person that that young person may need in times of grief and loss.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Prash has just put up on the chat, you know, my youngest went to school the same morning her mother died. That was her way of dealing with it. She was 9 at the time. So yeah, I remember I grew up, my mum died when I was 18 months old. I grew up with my grandma and I adopted the family next door. There was 5 children and I lived in their house. One day we used to do a paper round. I went to the door to meet Lynn. We did a paper round together. Mr. Rutter came to the door. He said to me, "I'm really sorry, Mrs. Rutter died last night." And I went, "Oh." And off we went, did our paper round. And in my head, I'm like, I feel so, I don't understand how I feel. I feel really numb. But she's not my mum. Why am I feeling so sad? That's not my mum. I didn't know. I was 12, 14 or something like that. I didn't know about grief and bereavement, why it had affected me so much. Oh, we have to keep an eye on the time. Keep going. Okay, next slide. This is a diagram called the dual process model. Okay, here we go. So this is a model that's used in understanding how grief works. There's so many theories around grief and we're all individual, but it's quite a good one for explaining about children and young people and adults and how they're different. So on the one side, you know, as an adult, we might have to deal with the loss of a close relative. We might have to go over to the house and go through all the bills and try and work out, you know, did Granddad pay that bill? There's nothing, he's not marked it on any way. And we try and phone up the utility company. I'm really sorry, can't share that information with you due to data protection, etc. So we're dealing with all that stuff. The loss of our father has to be put on hold. So, you know, we're dealing with the day-to-day stuff. The grief work has to be put on hold. A young child can oscillate between these two sides. So a young child could say, "Have you seen, my mummy died? Have you seen my new dolly?" And the parent might think, "Oh no, she's in denial." You know, the Kubler-Ross, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Oh, they're in denial. They're not, but that's a normal thing. The child might work that out through playing with her toys. A teenager, this is a generalization, doesn't want to be on that grief side. So a grief feeling comes in and it's like, let's get my headphones, la 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 la. Don't want to think about that. Don't want to think about it. A very general view, but yeah. And then the next slide, we're coming into land in about 10 minutes on this. Which families cope best? This is about resilience. So this diagram, you know, if you think about the families that you work with in your communities, the families that are on the right-hand side on my slide, the resilient families, you know, perhaps they've got that wider support network, communication in the house is okay, they're doing okay. Well, as good as you know, things can be. Pretty positive attitude generally in the house. There's clear boundaries. Housing is okay, it's good enough. There's a faith community there. There's people that you can call on. As Jed says, you know, there's the, well, there's not, you know, say the meals that are coming in, there might not be the meals that would be there when there's a bereavement. And yeah, and then on the left-hand side, there's a whole list, isn't there, where there's a family, where there's alcohol and substance misuse. There's already before the bereavement, communication was not good. Different temperaments, maybe there's psychiatric illness. Discipline, you know, I've told you not to do that. If I tell you again, you go up to your room. They do it again. Doesn't, you know, nothing's done. They're struggling already. They're just struggling with life and, you know, money and stuff. And maybe they're dealing with significant life events already, or maybe there's family conflict or separation. So there's those families where it's like, what, you know, how do they manage? Next slide. For all children and young people, I feel like a gramophone, shows my age, gramophone, I feel like a repeated message, you know, to children. They're not necessarily getting up, and I'll ask Jed what she thinks about this, but you know, I'm finding lots of children are just really tired. But then you say, have you been out? When did you last go out? I had a student the other day. She had to go 26th of January or something like that. It was like 3 weeks ago at the time. Routine, fresh air, simple stuff, coming down for a meal, not on the screen all the time, not, you know, parents, adults, you know, don't let your children watch everything that's on the news. You know, tell your friends, your people that you're supporting, you know, it's not helpful for them to see it. It's not helpful for me to be bombarded by stuff all the time, and appreciating small things. Jed, anything to add to that from your experience with young people?
Yeah, my son last year was he's very into politics and watching the news and watching TV, and me and Richard would say, right, we don't really want to watch the news and everything about the pandemic when the girls are downstairs, because there's a lot of doom and gloom. So we had to try and strike a balance, so which was difficult because we knew that they had to know about what was going on in terms of the pandemic because of what was going on with school. But at the same time, we didn't want them to be bombarded with those messages. So we had to agree with our son that he would watch the news later on at night rather than during the day. And in terms of fresh air, trying to get young people up, ready, dressed to go out for a walk is like pulling out your own teeth. Very, very hard work. Even the young people that Richard and myself work with at the ends, not many of them are going out for walks. And it could be a case of one young woman that I work with, her parents don't want her to go outside for walks because of the new strain of the virus, because viruses are airborne. So if she goes out for a long walk, the potential is she may bring that into the home, and then the parents or the children will be sick. How do you balance that when we know that fresh air does the mind good, but also at the same time you're trying to balance not getting the virus because of the new strain that's out there? It's quite tricky, and not only do we have to navigate that, but we're asking young people to be able to navigate that as well. So it's a very difficult time.
Mm-hmm. I just encourage children to put their head out the window and get some breath, so breathe in, you know, explain about getting oxygen into their heads to help them concentrate. If they won't go out, if they've got a garden, go outside, kick a ball around. If you've got space, you can do that in, or at least open a window, the very minimum. Routine, have a wash, very sort of things you never thought you'd have to sort of ask. Okay, just moving on to the next slide. So what advice can we give to grieving adults who have children? Just assuring them that many things are normal. What they're going through is normal. So it's so hard. If you've got a young person who's up and down anyway, you know, differentiating between, is this normal? Is this not normal? Trying to remain in adult mode when you're able to. So as we said earlier on, children are seeing adults distressed and upset, and there's nothing wrong with children seeing a parent crying. I'm not saying that, but where adults can remain in adult mode. An example would be, I was working with a young person, and you know, one of the effects of grief often is you know, financially there are strains on the family, and this child, the parent had lost their partner, and the parent had told the child, I think they were about 12, all the details of the finances, the bank account balance, everything, and the child was carrying the weight of that. So actually that adult really needed to confide in another adult about those things, not the child. Maintaining as many anchors as possible. Before lockdown, that'd be great. That means, like, yeah, if they can go to that football club, if they can go to the dance class, yeah, keep going. And then adolescents need somewhere safe to unburden. Just a few more slides and 5 minutes to go before we have some questions here. So next slide. So what are the additional challenges? Jed talked about, you know, the Caribbean thing about meals, bringing meals. Was it 9 days, Jed?
Yeah, it's called 9 nights, but it can
nights.
Go on until the funeral takes place. Yeah.
So there's cultures that are used to doing that. Aside of that, from I was talking to an Asian girl who found it quite hard because she ended up, her and her sister took over doing all the hospitality side of things, because they didn't think the parents were coping, so they're very good. They sort of took over all of the preparing the meals and the food and everything, but it actually really wore them out. That they found that really difficult. Not being able to say goodbye. Thinking about Remy, you know, she couldn't, because she wasn't 18, she wasn't able to go to the care home. Very encouraged that I heard on the news, was it this morning, being able to go into a care home to hold hands with somebody. Whoa, whoever would have thought holding hands with someone would be such a huge thing. All the things about funerals have changed. And as Jed said, just that closeness, not being able to hug, managing our feelings, finding new ways to mourn, and recognizing everyone grieves differently. One of the things I think with young people, I think that they're very good with tech. So I think perhaps, you know, one thing they could do quite easily, you know, if you have remembering the deceased, you know, having photos, you know, a 12-year-old or younger could quite easily put them into a video. You know, if you gave them a job of coming up with a video memorial of the person who's died, that could be something that they could really get involved with and help me people like me who aren't so techie. Just a couple of resources from me. The next slide, the first aid kit. Now I've got a book that I use all the time. It's called Draw on Your Emotions by Margot Sunderland. It's literally a whole load of worksheets, all sorts of things. That's the other one I'm going to show you. First aid kit, script for this. You could do this on the phone. What's the first aid kit for? Well, first aid kit for is, you know, if I cut my finger, go to my first aid kit, I get a plaster, put it on my finger, then it helps me feel better. What about an emotional first aid kit? What might I have if I'm feeling sad, if I'm feeling, I don't know, I can't describe it. What things are in my emotional first aid kit? So a young person might say, well, I watch my favourite box set. I put on my favourite music. I've got a happy mix that I put on my headphones. I phone my friend, talk to my auntie. Put those into your first aid kit. You can pull those out. Younger children might want to make a little first aid kit, put some bits of paper and they can pick it, you know, jam jar or something. The next slide, and just coming to a close here, thoughts in my head, very simple. Draw ahead, say to them, do you know what, when I've got lots going around in my head, I find it so helpful if I write things down. So I just want you to put some thought bubbles on this head, and I want you to put in those thought bubbles all the stuff that you've got going around your head at the moment. And as a youth worker and a counsellor in schools, I've found that we can look at that sheet and we can go, oh yes, shall we have a look at this? You've written anger. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about that? You've written my brother. What is it about your brother that you want to say here? And then there's the Tough Stuff book, the journal. You can get this from the ataloss.org website. And then finally, just talking about looking after ourselves. Even today, it was good to see, a slide about looking after ourselves. Can we have that slide up about danger, looking after ourselves, Omar? Next one. So if you are doing this, listening to young people, it can be overwhelming and it can be hard to switch off. So watch out for feeling compassion fatigue, where you're like, do you know what, I don't feel anything anymore. And be careful that you have people that you offload to, that are there for you to listen. Maybe someone that you can talk to confidentially. Kate Middleton, Dr. Kate Middleton, has talked a lot about this. She has a YouTube thing on the Soul Survivor Watford talk about looking after yourself. Just one more slide from me. Caring for self. Yeah, I used to love Thunderbirds. International Rescue. We're not International Rescue. We're not sitting there waiting for the latest crisis, or you zoom off or we get in the telephone box and become Superman, Superwoman. Listening intently is exhausting. Have someone else to share with. Know your limits. Don't feel guilty. Beginning of lockdown, I was like, everyone seemed to be, whoa, this is a great time, I'm going to write a book. And like at the beginning of lockdown, and whenever March last year, I was like, for 2 weeks, I was like, I don't know what to do. I was all over the place. And however you find to switch off, good ways of switching off, relaxing, enjoying the beautiful world that God's made, whatever it needs. Anything to add, Jed? I feel like I've talked so much and not giving you a chance here.
No, I think you've covered everything nicely, and this slide just sums everything that we've said off. Even though we're caring for others, it's really, really important that we care for ourselves, because we don't want to be burnt out, so that these young people don't have anyone to go to.
Yeah. There's two, when you get the slides from Cassius, there's 2 more, which are basically just links. Whenever I find something good, I've just tried to put it into the presentation. And links says the Church Army has done a really good little free download for young people, deals with faith questions and all sorts. And there's a whole load of stuff there, but I'm looking at my watch, and I think if we've got time for questions, let's have those.
We actually have one question from Crash, and he's asked, have you found that children are more resilient than we first thought?
Jed, anything to?
I would say yes, in all fairness. So for me, in terms of young people we work with, we thought that that this lockdown that they're going through at the moment would be worse for them than the first. But their answer to us was, well, we've been through the first one. This one's easier because we know what's coming. We know we're going to work online. We know that we won't be able to go out. So in answer to that question, I would say yes, what we thought they would be experiencing is not the case at all.
Yeah. Children and young people are, I mean, children are very blunt. They just come out with the questions, and that's good in a way. I'm working with a boy who's lost his mum, and you know, he just says, I just miss my mum. What can you say?
Yeah.
Apart from echo that back, you know, you miss your mum. It must be so hard. And I think as Christians, this is one thing I'd say, you know, it's very, we want to defend God, don't we? We want to jump in. This is so hard. And we want to say the but bit, you know, but God's in here somewhere. God's in there. He's working his purposes out. And sometimes it's all true, but there's a time, isn't there? And a time to say things and a time not to. So yeah, children are resilient, but think to that table of resilience. Children who are resilient can usually say, I can, I have, and I am. So if you've got a child who can say, I've got my friends, my best mate, and I've got my auntie, she's great, and I'm good at football, I'm good at dancing, and I am funny. You know, the children who just like, oh, it's too hard, can't do this. The children who go, can't do this every time, whatever it is, they may be the ones who aren't quite so resilient, need a bit more boosting up and a lot more prayer.
We have another question from Emily. How do you avoid people you support being dependent on you?
Ooh. Well, I would say we're all designed to attach, aren't we? That's how we survive. You know, a little baby reaches out and attaches. You know, they're looking up at you. You have to pick it up and give it a cuddle. My daughter's expecting in April. You know, I'm looking forward to seeing that little baby. But so we're designed to attach, but how do we stop it going over? You know, where's dependence? Pass it over to Jed. Hard question.
It is a hard question. What I do, and I won't say it's vast experiences. I start off with checking in on them every other day, and then I'll probably do that every 2 days, and then I'll kind of lessen it as we go along, and then I'll say, are you able to speak with your parents? Is there someone else in the family that you can speak to, an aunt or an uncle, a cousin, or what have you? Is there anyone at school that you can make contact with? So I will check on them, what's the word I'm looking for, quite frequently initially, and then I will then try and signpost them to somebody else that can potentially support them. But I always say, I'm here if you need me, and I kind of leave the door open, so then it's up to them. And I find that they contact you less when they need you less, if that makes any sense, because there's other people there that they can also tap into.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think boundaries are so important, aren't they? You know, we can't say to anyone, contact me night or day, I'm always there for you. We're not.
No.
We're not. I have I've 2 mobiles, work mobile, personal mobile. Young people don't get that one. They don't always get that one either, but that's my work one. I'm not going to look at that outside of my working times. And the best people for them, really, you know, are their families usually. I know as a young youth worker, I wanted to be the person they came to with everything. I'm not necessarily the best person. Any more?
Yeah, I just picked up one from Anne. I don't know if you can see that, Sharon. She's saying that she typed hers in the chat. While you're just looking for that, yeah, just to say, Pete and Jed, thank you so much. That was really excellent. A lot of information to take away, and I know that having looked through the references at the end as well, that there are lots of links that will be helpful for people to be able to follow up and further find further information as well. And also some people have, you know, shared some really personal stories in the chat as well. Yeah, just one that Tracy wrote. Actually, yeah, that's just to the panelists, so I won't read that out to everybody, just in case it's not meant to be shared. Sharon, are you able to see the question from Kathy just as the last one?
Unfortunately, I can't see the question, but I'm looking at the one, like you said, that's been highlighted to the panelists from Vanessa, and just wanted to double check, Vanessa, is that specifically for the panelist that you wanted to pose your comment?
For everybody. Yeah, she said that's for everybody. Vanessa's my wife. She's just sitting the other end of the table, by the way, if you're wondering. If you thought I had really clever technology there, just to reassure you that that's not the case.
That's a good point, though, isn't it? So young people don't feel rejected. Be honest about what time you do have, so they don't feel rejected. It just threw me back to years ago as a young person. My wife and I, you know, had a youth group, and there was a young person. We said she wanted to come over and talk to my wife and I, and we said, we're on holiday next week. She said, where are you going? We said, well, we're not actually going away. And she said, then she was like, but so you're around? Yeah, but we're not available. And it's like, oh, so I'm just work. Difficult, isn't it? But boundaries are important. Maybe that, you know, where young people perhaps haven't got those boundaries. There are so many resources, Cassius, I've got behind me. I could just go, try this one, there's this one, but a lot are on that list.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And if you could repost your question in the chat, I'm going to take that as the last one. We are coming down towards 11 o'clock. Yeah, just to make sure that that's answered before we finish. While we're waiting for that, Omar, I wonder if you could post the first poll just for people to respond to, if that's all right. I hope I haven't wrong-footed you on that one. But just a question, just to say thank you again to Richard and Jedine. So if you're able to indicate, do you feel better equipped to support young people through bereavement as a result of what you've heard? And lots of food for thought in what you shared, and perhaps things that we hadn't considered before. So actually, it may be that there's a lot more feeling of being quite daunted at the prospect of trying to support young people as a result of what you've said, but overwhelmingly, yeah, we're just waiting for some more results to come in. The comment that you made quite early on in the presentation, Pete, about time and the importance of, you know, just being able to make that time. Yes, being boundaried with it, as you rightly said, as Jedine had said as well, making sure that we're working within our safeguarding policies, I think is really critical. So I'll let you comment, Pete, and then I will end the poll. I think there are a few more people just getting their responses in.
Okay. I was just going to say, Cassius, that on the lossandhope.org website, which is a website for churches with lots of bereavement stuff on, I do deliver a roughly monthly webinar around bereavement. So people are welcome to attend.
So that's lossandhope.org.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to end the poll in there and share the results. So you can see that the vast majority of people actually are feeling better equipped. And I take huge comfort from that. I didn't say as part of the introduction that Jedine is also a university lecturer. So her presentation skills really came through in that, and really appreciate your wisdom as well, Pete. I just wanted to check with Sharon whether you had any final comments just before we close.
Just one moment. I believe Anne. What have I got notes? I'm still not getting it this end.
Okay. What we'll do is, Omar, if you could just queue up that video to play for us to end. This is one of the videos that I found really impactful going through Pete's presentation, and I thought it'd be a good one to end on. And if you have any questions that weren't answered, interested to know. Oh, right, okay. So my understanding is, just with this webinar as background information, that it's just the panelists that will appear on screen. If you are an attendee, it allows you to post questions in. It's actually the first time that I've used this webinar function, so I hope that is okay. I'm going to ask Omar to play that video and thank Pete and Jed again for a fantastic session. Our next session will be at 11:30 with Dr. Delroy Hall. And I'm just going to encourage you, you don't have to log out of your devices. Please stay logged in just to save you having to find all the details to log back in again, if that's okay, and rejoin us at 11:30. So Omar, if you could play that video for us to finish. Thanks.
Saying goodbye when someone special dies. The world feels very different right now. I can't leave my house. I can't see my friends. I can't go to school. And I am feeling sad. Someone very special to me died yesterday. When my mum told me, she gave me the tightest, longest hug. I knew this special person was in hospital sick, but I didn't think they would die. The doctors and nurses did everything they could to try and make them better. Mum said they tried really hard. I wished I could have gone to the hospital to say goodbye, but I wasn't allowed. Mum and Dad couldn't go either. We were all very sad. They were not alone. The kind nurse sat with them and held their hand. The nurse told them how much we all loved them. I wanted to go to the funeral, but I wasn't allowed to do that either. It was all very confusing. I chatted to my mum and dad, and they helped me feel better. We wrote letters and I drew a picture of the beach. This was their favourite place to be. We cried. I wished I could have hugged them. This was our goodbye. Today we are going to find lots of photos of us having fun together. We are going to make a book and fill it with stories about the times we shared together. I miss them so much. Mum told me that when someone dies, they can never come back. But this doesn't mean that I will stop loving them. They will always be very special to me and will live in my heart forever.